All
And we
right.
are,
Thank you.
right, we will be recording this. Oh, I should say, let me make another
Okay.
announcement, sorry. So, this
Hmm.
evening we are recording, and we do have a YouTube channel that we put up, all the recordings on YouTube. We also have a newsletter that goes out, and we are in the Zampa publication as well. I don't know if we got in there this time, but we usually are in Zampa. And if anyone would like to make a donation to Lama Adam, you can do so through our website, santamonica.ktc.com, or you can do it right through the link on the newsletter that we sent out today. So that's my announcements for the evening. And I think this is our last meeting. This is our last meeting until the new year. So this is the last one for until 2023. And we'll send out another newsletter for in the beginning of the year. And Lama Adam will be joining us in the new year as well as Lama Kathy, Lama Karma. Yeah, we got all the good ones. Okay, so thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Wow. Thank you, Jody. Um, yeah, this is exciting. I actually just came from a white elephant gift exchange that was really fun. I don't think I'd ever done one before. And I had this didgeridoo that I was trying to get rid of for like the last 20 years. And it became like the hit of the white elephant party, so got traded 3 or 4 times. Um, and I came home with a slightly off color "Have a nice day" mug that when you pick it up to drink, it has a gesture on the bottom of the mug that kind of counteracts the "Have a nice day." But you end up with what you end up with in the white elephant. But yeah, it was a good time. So I hope everybody has a good season, whatever you're celebrating. I love holiday music. So like I've been like putting together my holiday playlist, and I found some really good like weird Christmas song playlists, like B-side Christmas songs that you would never think of, or by like old soul artists and country artists and stuff. So I encourage, if you're getting tired of the Burl Ives and stuff like that, like there's actually a great catalog of B-side Christmas music out there too. So this is actually part 2 of a talk on patience, and I have been reading this book by Sigar Khantrul Rinpoche called Peaceful Heart, the Buddhist Practice of Patience. And basically reading it because I really need patience. I have a problem with patience. So that's, when you're going to teach, it actually is helpful to be able to find something you can actually work on yourself. And that's one of those things. So I started teaching last time, and we'll recap a little bit of what I talked about last time today, but mostly move into some new material. Before we say refuge, I just wanted to share, there's a interesting thing I'd read in Daniel Perdue's book called Debate in Tibetan Buddhism, where he talks about the things that make an argument true in the context of Tibetan Buddhist monastic debate. And there's a couple things that you would expect, but the one that surprised me was that the person you're debating with has to want, or at least be open to, having their mind changed. And that's considered one of the things that can make your argument true or not. This is not a comment on objective truth. This is just to say, like, as we talk to people and have these kind of conversations, if someone's mind isn't open to changing, it doesn't really matter whether our argument is true or not. So I'm not sure where all of your minds are going. I read that, the first thing I thought of was like social media, things like that, but politics, but I think it applies here today too, because I think we all have a little bit of worry about people expressing views that maybe challenge our own beliefs, whatever those are, even if it's within the whole canon of Dharma and stuff. So I think it's important to check in at the beginning of one of these talks and kind of just think, like, am I open right now to potentially having my mind changed tonight? Am I like open to hearing something that maybe initially I don't believe or understand, but am I willing to just hear it? Because ultimately what we do with information is up to ourselves. Like, as long as the information itself doesn't hurt us and we can absorb any kind of information, and then what we do with it is up to ourselves. So if we hear things, we're open, then we can maybe actually take them away and test them in our life, see how they actually apply in our own situation, see if they're relevant, see if they're effective. We can actually test those things. But the precondition to all of that is having an openness to potentially changing our minds. So I think it's worth kind of checking in and asking ourselves, like, am I open to potentially having my mind changed tonight? And hopefully from that space, we can talk about this topic of patience. So with that said, let's say the prayer of the 4-line refuge prayer. We can say it 4 times in English. Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and the noble Sangha. Through the merit of accomplishing the 6 perfections, may I achieve awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and the noble Sangha. Through the merit of accomplishing the 6 perfections, may I achieve awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and the noble Sangha. Through the merit of accomplishing the 6 perfections, may I achieve awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. I'll say a brief prayer of my own. Aden sawe nama rinpoche nagi jiwa periden jula. Aden champo gone je sunde kusum jogi jup sabu son. Okay. I'll do a little recap of last time, but one last little anecdote I shared last time that I want to recap today was, because I still think it's funny. I got I'm still getting all these compliments on my beard. Like people are saying like, wow, your beard is like longer. You have a beard. Your beard is getting grayer, yes, true. But what's so funny is like nobody has come to me and said, you're wearing glasses now? And that's the new thing. So like, I think this is so funny because like, it's actually a great way to frame this conversation about patience and aggression and how we sometimes misattribute the causes of things, I mean, everybody has made a comment about my beard. Nobody noticed that in 46 years, I never wore glasses before. So like, I think that just goes to show sometimes we're wrong when we think something has changed or something is different. Like the cause, we could be wrong about the cause. So, so last time we started talking about patience, and we started out talking about sewa, which is this Tibetan Buddhist word for like a warm, open heart. And Pema Chodron, when she talks about this topic, often describes it as being almost like an open wound that we have this urge to protect. So this warm, open heart, we have this instinct of wanting to close it off and hide it away because it's kind of vulnerable and open. And we get very protective of it, and we hide it away sometimes kind of just for ourselves and those close to us. But we can let it be open and be vulnerable as we try to help and be with others as well. And we're told that by pushing beyond our usual comfort zone and working with situations where we might normally resist, and by like really truly selflessly being there for others, that we can feel some kind of unsurpassable joy. And we talked a little bit about like, does this seem true for us in our experience? And can we think of examples in our life where when we hid away that warm heart, it felt a little cold and closed off. And when we actually let it be open and breathe, we actually felt some kind of joy or had a glimpse of what might be possible. And so as the source of a real lasting joy, this warm, open heart is really kind of our most precious possession. So we do have to protect it. And we do encounter a lot of threats to it, but we often misattribute where those threats are coming from. And we often think it's other people or external circumstances that are threatening, sewa, this warm, open heart. But the truth is that those threats arise from a heart that's somehow feeling disturbed. And our own aggression is the primary way that that warm, open heart is disturbed. Shantideva referred to aggression as our sorrow-bearing enemy. And Ziger Khantrul Rinpoche said that patience is the antidote to that. We also talked about how the Tibetan word zopa that we translate as patience might more appropriately be translated as forbearance or tolerance. But I think that tolerance and forbearance and even patience seem to apply some quality of like just waiting it out. Like if we just can wait this out, then happiness will be there for me later. So I'll just wait through this and then maybe distract myself or sleep or whatever, and then eventually I'll be happy. The reward's coming later, rather than staying in the present moment. But Ziger Khantrul Rinpoche said that the essence of patience, rather than like forbearance or waiting or anything like that, he said it's more like not getting disturbed. It's like not letting that heart get disturbed. So how do we prevent these disturbances? So the first thing is we need to learn how we get disturbed and really get self-reflective, actively self-reflective about the ways that we personally get disturbed. I use the word we a lot, when we're teaching, to kind of give this general idea of like all of us, but I want to make clear like this is each of us individually in our own lives with our own jobs and family and all of that, seeing how these things happen to us. So really looking at how we get disturbed and the situations that trigger us. And then we need to think about antidotes for those ways that we get disturbed. Usually when we encounter something we don't like, we start to resist it. And in that process, our heart begins to close down a bit. And that is aggression. And aggression is what cuts off the flow of sewa. And on the larger scale, aggression is pretty easy to understand. But we need to note that it's also simple irritation. Simple irritation is an instance of aggression. That's the beginning of it, but it's the real deal. So when we think about working with patience, the antidote to aggression, we can't fool ourselves and think that like the only opportunities to work with that are when a really big bad thing happens. We may think of like the big instances of aggression and big instances of getting upset, but we have this wealth of opportunities to train in patience every single day. And they come in the form of these little simple irritations. I mean, most of us, I think, can probably think of 3 ways that we got irritated before we even left the house first thing in the morning, and each of those is a great opportunity. But patience is a practice, and practice does take time. And if we're going to adopt this practice, we have to be ready to lean into some discomfort, but we also have to be prepared to fail, probably a lot, with some grace and humor along the way. One thing I think it's important, I wanted to start out with this, but I forgot. I've been doing a 30-hour trauma sensitive mindfulness certification program. And there's a lot of things in there. It's really neat. Like there are things in there that come from and are evident in the Buddhist teachings, but I don't know that that's ever been, kind of put in that context in the Buddhist teachings. The idea of like safe ways for people to practice who are maybe dealing with post-traumatic stress or any kind of unintegrated trauma. And there's really simple ways to kind of frame meditation and practices like this to help people. But I think a really good one I just want to share today is, and we can do this kind of briefly as like sort of a guided meditation, just kind of sitting for a moment and recognizing like on a scale of like 1 to 10, where we are with our arousal right now, with like 1 being completely checked out, zoned out, and 10 being like very agitated, you know, fixated. And kind of just noticing where we are on that scale of 1 to 10. And the reason this is useful is because in order to be safe and effective with most of these practices we're doing, we really should be somewhere between like a 3 and a 7. So if we're finding ourselves trying to do some practice, or particularly like some of the things we're going to talk about today with self-reflection, if these things are getting us to where we're ending up past that 3, you know, lower than the 3 or higher than the 7, that's probably a good indicator that it's time to take a break and maybe do something which is not what we normally recommend in Buddhism, but like do something to relax or give yourself some comfort, you know. That's when that kind of thing is needed, so we can get back into what we call the window of tolerance. So something to think about, and we never really know in any group. It's like 1 in 10 people have had some sort of adverse reaction to meditation. So in any group, it's likely there's someone who needs to know that kind of information. So it's a good thing to be able to share with people in general, and to let people know that they have a choice and it's okay if they need to shift in their seat or take a break or do another practice. You know, like that's just the kind, I think, way for us to keep a space safe for everyone. So the book, the Zigar Contra book, is a commentary on Shanti Deva's Way of the Bodhisattva, the Patience chapter. And it starts out with the verse, all the good works gathered in 1,000 ages, such as deeds of generosity and offerings to the blissful ones, a single flash of anger shatters them. And there's a quote from Padampa Sanjay too, 1 act of aggression is heavier than 100 acts of desire. So aggression, like light and dark, you know, they can't exist alongside each other. One erases the other. So aggression arises from our habits of confusion, and we've been cultivating those for a long time. So getting to know our confused habits and learning the virtuous habits that can replace those confused habits are important. A lot of those things are baked into our practice, mantra, Tonglen. There's a lot of tools that I think many of us probably know about. We don't have time to go into them all today, but if you're engaged in Buddhist practice, you will find these. You know, like there's lots of ways to replace confused habits with virtuous habits, and we'll talk about a few today. And our confused habits are all based on some kind of self-clinging, some sort of hiding that open, tender heart. So one skillful habit is just becoming very aware of our habitual pull towards selfishness, our habitual pull to kind of hide that vulnerability. And mindfulness is a big help with this, both in terms of the practice of mindfulness, which cultivates the skill of mindfulness, and also just real honest self-reflection. The thing about doing an active practice of self-reflection is it leads to greater self-awareness. You know, when we start to get to know how we are and how we react in certain situations, that increases our awareness about ourselves and our environment. And likewise, our awareness in the moment leads to a much richer and more meaningful self-reflection. When we're really engaged in the moment, that's going to give us more to examine when we actually get into self-reflection. We also talked last time about how it's not only our peace of mind that we lose when we react with anger, but we also lose our strength. Zigar Contra said, more than bliss and ecstasy, having a stable inner strength is what fosters our self-esteem the most. Our strength determines how we feel about ourselves and the world. And we don't usually like getting angry. And I think last time we spent a little while thinking about potential times in our life where our anger has damaged our own self-esteem. Not to mention, of course, other people, but I think we can all think of situations where our aggression and our anger, even if it felt in the moment like some kind of power, actually hurt us in the long run. And something to cultivate, or something to contemplate, that we'll talk a little bit about later, is, did we feel like we were in control in those situations? So a big part of what Zigar Control talks about in here is cultivating this unconventional path of unconventional thinking. The unconventional thinking of Dharma helps make us feel stronger and have greater self-confidence in any situation. There's a saying, a patient person already has one foot in nirvana. And patience is knowing our weaknesses and being prepared for when they're challenged. It's gaining familiarity with our tendencies for aggression, spotting them hopefully in the moment when they arise, although even just a little bit afterwards is better than nothing, and remembering to apply the antidotes. We also talked about the 72 ways we get disturbed, which start with the 8 worldly concerns of pleasure and pain, gain and loss, praise and blame, good reputation and bad reputation, and how so much of our time is spent trying to get pleasure, gain, praise, and good reputation, and how much time is spent trying to avoid pain, loss, blame, and bad reputation. So that's the first 8. Then we could make that 24 by thinking about how those 8 worldly concerns, we can think of them in terms of ourselves. We can think of them in terms of people who are in our circle, like our loved ones and our family. And we can think of them in terms of people we don't like. So there's probably some similarities in how we feel with ourselves and the people who are in our circle, but a lot of times it's the opposite when we think of those 8 worldly concerns in terms of people we don't like. You know, we're happy when we get praise, we're unhappy when people we don't like get praise. And these are ways that we get disturbed. And if you take those 8 in those 3 ways, you then have 24 ways we get disturbed. And then to get to 72, you think of those in terms of the past, the present, and the future. And Zigar Control Rinpoche recommends, actually, this is one of the ways of doing a self-reflection, is actually trying to find one at least of all of those 72 that we've experienced, and taking some time to think about that. This is one of the reasons I brought up the window of tolerance, because I think this could be really tough. You know, in the book, he actually compares it to a colonoscopy. So something we need to do, but yeah. So I think that's a really good self-reflection to do, very helpful. But what do we do in the moment of disturbance? You know, when we see aggression rising, hopefully just before or during. And first we need to start working with lower stakes instances of disturbance, which is why I've said in the beginning here, like these small irritations are the things we should be looking for as these great opportunities. And luckily there are so many of them, right? So each one of these is a chance for us to practice for the bigger stuff. So the first remedy, I think this is where we stopped last time. Zigar Control actually recommends manufactured happiness and laughter as a remedy. And he said, we can regard cheerfulness as the gatekeeper that prevents aggression from entering the precious temple of the heart. The face of that gatekeeper is smiling or laughing. And he talks about how even forced laughter can lead to real smiles and real laughter. And you can actually practice smiling or laughing in reaction to things that might upset you. And I know I shared the story about how I used to cuss whenever I dropped my keys or spill the mug or something, you know. And then I realized it, this is long before I was Buddhist, but I was like, this is like so low stakes. Like, why am I upset about this simple thing? And I started trying to laugh like before I'd even come across this stuff. And now it's just second nature. So when stuff happens, not all the time, but a lot of the time when those little things happen, I do remember and I just kind of laugh at myself, and it really changes the tone. And so I think that's worth remembering. So moving into new material, another bit of unconventional thinking is noticing that situations are either like a dented copper pot or like a broken glass. The idea here being that they're either fixable or they're just the way they are. And this seems obvious, but in the moment, it's something we tend to forget. And part of the reason for that is because our habitual confusion doesn't want to accept that suffering is a part of life. And what a significant part of life it is. I mean, that's the first noble truth. That's the first one. You know, the Buddha said suffering is a part of life, and suffering has a cause, which is clinging or attachment, primarily to the idea of the self. And that if we can remove the cause of suffering, we can experience the cessation of suffering. And there's a path to do that. And it's said that every Dharma teaching is an exposition of those four noble truths. But just starting with the first one there, suffering is a part of life. And we have to remember that suffering in this cycle of birth and rebirth, this is suffering. Samsara is suffering. It's just the way it is. And we can work on liberating ourselves and others from samsara, but a fundamental step is recognizing what samsara is, and it is suffering. We're never going to make a comfy, happy home in samsara. If we want to hang out in samsara, our fleeting moments of happiness will always lead back to some kind of suffering. And we'll be happier, ironically, the more we accept that. So I remember in the 3-year retreat, there was a great quote from Lama Yeshe, who had done the previous retreat and was doing a second retreat when I was in there. And there's just all these ways in 3-year retreat where we would try to make it more comfortable. Like you're in 3-year retreat practicing renunciation, but like you want to get a really nice cushion, and you want to like get the right fan in the summertime. And I remember Lama Yeshe at some point was like, you need to quit trying to hack samsara. And I love that because there's things we can do and there's things that we should do to try to help people not to suffer, but we can't hack samsara. It's not going to happen. So what's wrong with our conventional way of thinking? Ziegler Contral says the goal of our most conventional thinking is to preserve the ego. This is our unconscious habit in default mode. The unconventional thinking of Dharma, however, aims to preserve the peaceful heart of Tsewa. This requires conscious reasoning that is based on wisdom rather than habit. So knowing life is suffering, we have two choices. We can live as we have, being upset at every disturbance, waiting for a perfect happy situation, or we can see suffering as the key to our awakening. And suffering actually helps us develop disenchantment with samsara, and that's what we need as motivation to practice Dharma. The Ziegler Contral Rinpoche also says, unconventional thinking and reverse psychology are like weapons in our battle against aggression and fear. And he invites us to think about how much people sacrifice for the relatively tiny rewards of pleasure, and praise, and wealth, and how our society values work that has those conventional aims, like work that leads towards satisfying the 8 worldly concerns is something that's kind of most valued in our culture. But we also give little credit or value to like artists or musicians or teachers. And he says it's kind of the same for Buddhist practitioners. Like, most people won't notice our sacrifices towards enlightenment. But he says that's okay. We shouldn't be seeking approval from others. And I want to read you one of his quotes too. He says, it's important to emphasize self-respect. Respect towards yourself is more significant than any respect from others because you know yourself better. When you practice patience, for example, you must know why you are doing it and how it benefits you. If you value self-respect and do virtuous things that are unknown to others, you will naturally gain self-confidence, strength, and freedom from your neuroses. You will feel more and more inspired to develop your tsewa and shed the 8 worldly concerns because of the benefit and freedom you personally experience by doing so. Your heart will be at peace, and eventually others will respect you as a person who has truly been transformed. So another thing to contemplate, both in the context of our practice and literally in the moment of irritation, is the myriad causes and conditions that come together to create the appearance of us and the appearance of others and all phenomena. Thinking about how everything arises interdependently. Everything arises in dependence on a whole other set of causes. Each cause has its own set of other causes, and it's kind of an infinite regression. And when we think about this, both in our self-reflection time and in the moment of feeling irritation, we have to generate some forgiveness with ourselves about how hard it is not to react in certain ways in certain situations. And I think the idea here is there's so many causes and conditions coming together for who we think we are, and so many habitual patterns that have developed. We have to have a little forgiveness when things do irritate us, or when we do fly off the handle. At least initially, we can see how there might be all these causes and conditions that kind of made it really hard not to react that way. But that's our initial reaction. As soon as we can after that, we should be doing what we can to salvage the situation or create more warmth and compassion in the situation, become more present in a way that protects our tsewa. So we have to generate openness to this infinite variety of things that can happen to us and the infinite variety of causes that lead to our initial reactions. So sometimes after getting upset, we realize how silly it was to get upset in a certain situation. And that's actually a good thing. And he points out this is actually another instance where a sense of humor can be such a big help, that we need to notice the humor, particularly of our blaming external things and people for our own feelings. And this is one of those things that when we contemplated it, it actually is kind of funny. It's a little sad too, but it's a silly thing. So many times we get upset because we feel a certain way. I'm thinking in particular of like nonviolent communication here, where you name, the first thing is your observation is about like not a judgment, but what you actually saw. And then you express how it makes you feel, not like how they make you feel, but actually how you feel. And then you express it in terms of a need, like I need this to be this way. And then you make a request, like, can you help it be that way for me? And so, it's a smart way to communicate, and it actually is built in self-awareness in a way. But it's really funny when you start to learn a system of speaking like that, and you start to recognize that you can't make everything you say based on your assumptions about other people and other phenomena, but that is in a lot of ways how we think about things. So it's kind of funny, it has to be a little funny. So humor helps us to work with these small irritations in particular, so we're much more prepared for the bigger ones. And it's also an opportunity to connect our moments of anger or irritation with the tendencies of all humanity. So when we normally suffer, we limit our attention to like a specific situation, like our situation, like it's just us going through this thing, and we consider it to be outside the broader context of like all beings except for us. And it hurts much more because that feels lonely. It feels isolating. But these common experiences of anger and desire and pride and jealousy, sadness can all be seen as our connection to all other beings. And we can generate compassion in the lived experience of what countless others have suffered through as well. And we share that with all other beings. And it can actually be a feeling of unity and support rather than loneliness, and victimhood. So suffering does have a value, as it can spur this kind of contemplation. And this contemplation is what's necessary to understand the Four Noble Truths and how karma works, how causes and conditions come together. So that's one thing to just contemplate about suffering. Like, are we taking our instances of suffering as a reminder to contemplate, that this is every opportunity of suffering is a good chance to think about the Four Noble Truths and examine them in that moment. Another funny situation Ziegler Contra Rinpoche points out is he asks, like, do we get angry at physical conditions, like in particular, like natural disasters? Like, do we get angry at the natural disaster? That doesn't normally happen, but we make excuses to get angry at other beings because we assume they have some sort of intrinsic agent. We assume that their self did that to us, And we have to consider how many times we've met circumstances that led to emotions and reactions from us that we didn't anticipate or desire. In other words, like, how many times have we just seemed to lose control? This is a paragraph from the book that I really liked. He said, the arising of anger can be compared to the arising of an image in a mirror. An object placed before a mirror has no intention to produce a reflection, nor does the mirror have any intention to reflect. But the meeting of the two is a sufficient cause for an image to appear. In the case of anger, there is the meeting of the provoking circumstance and the person who is provoked. The circumstances that provoke the anger have no prior intention to do so. And the mind that reacts has no prior intention to be provoked. But when the two come together, anger arises. This is how habitual, unconscious reactions are generated. So do we ever have the intention to get angry? And when we do we feel like we're in control? So I think we can all think of situations where we've been overpowered by our reactivity and emotion. And when we can understand our own loss of control in the throes of anger, we're better able to transform situations when others treat us with larger doses of anger. And when we understand our own loss of control at the hands of anger, we have a better chance of turning an unfortunate situation into a positive one. And we can remember that the other person is likely suffering more than we are in that moment, because we're actually maybe aware of what's happening. And we can use that opportunity to cultivate a warm heart and transform that situation. Another thing we can contemplate in the moment and in our self-reflection is our assumptions about reality. Contemplating whether things are singular, unchanging, and autonomous. So the example Ziegler Contra Rinpoche provides is, like, if you're mad at someone, what part of the person are you mad at? This is one of those, I think this is a little awkward contemplation in the beginning to work with, but the idea here is we're all a collection of causes and conditions. Every instance of everything is a collection of causes and conditions. That's what interdependence is. So like, are you mad at the person's foot? Are you mad at their head? Are you mad at their mouth? Because that's where the words are coming from. You know, like what part of the person are you mad at? And then you might say, well, it's their mind, you know, because their mind is making them do that. But what part of the mind is it? You know, I mean, there's so many different things in any given mind, and it's changing all the time. So like a good example is if someone that you deeply admire, who has taught you many, many things of value, does something that you don't agree with, can we be angry only at the part of the mind that had the thought to do that specific thing? Can we separate out parts like that and still be angry at a person? Does that make any sense? The other thing is like unchanging, this idea that our bodies and minds are changing day to day. All beings, all phenomena, constantly in a state of change. So are we getting mad at the same person moments after they said or did whatever they did? Especially when you think about the fact that we often get mad and then instantly regret it. And I think I'm thinking right now of a situation where I saw somebody realize they shouldn't have done that, but I kept going, you know? And I think there are times where someone, maybe it's you, maybe it's the other person, instantly realizes like, oh, I need an escape hatch here. This was a bad idea. But if the emotions are strong, then it can just escalate. So there's change even in those little moments between an angry statement and the moment after that. So are we the same person we were when the perceived offense was occurred even, you know, like when the thing the person said happened, are we the same person moments later when it's time for us to respond? The fact that we aren't actually is promising, you know, like that's actually like hopeful, you know, we can do anything in that moment. And then the last point here is about autonomy, you know, noticing that everything arises from a convergence of numerous causes and conditions, each of which has its own set of causes and conditions. And remembering too that one of the causes and conditions is us. Like we're one of the causes and conditions in these situations of irritation or aggression. So these type of contemplations may not instantly make anger go away, but they do redirect the mind to something that's a lot more productive than where our minds might normally go, such as to blame or reifying or oversimplifying our experience to the point where it's actually kind of completely disconnected from the way things really are. And after doing this kind of an examination, you can rest the mind in that open, self-reflected state. You can also examine the potential causes and determine maybe which came from you and which came from the other person. And you can see if you can identify which of the 72 ways you're being disturbed. Experiences of anger like this can be really fruitful. And we can also work with them on the cushion. So if we analyze and see that there's no singularity, there's no unchanging element, there's no real autonomy, we come to realize the truth of the situation, which is that the object of our anger is illusory. And in the heat of anger, instead of lashing out, we could go to the cushion to meditate and analyze in this way. Maybe not always, but when you can, it's a good idea. And then you can decide how you want to respond. This is one of those things, like I've said this, I think, a lot before. When we really think we need to say a thing, that's probably not a good time to say it. So this is one of those things we can do instead. You know, when we really feel like I know exactly what I'm going to say to that person, I'm going to say it right now. That's probably a good time to go sit on the cushion and do these kinds of analysis. And you know, you could say it later if it seems like a good idea. but that's definitely one of the things I've learned is when I have that urge to speak, that's a good sign that what I have to say probably should wait. And then when it waits, it usually doesn't need to be said later. So, but that's the thing we can do. You know, we can actually go to our cushion. And I don't know if that's a thing that we normally think about in those moments, but that's a great time to go sit down and contemplate these things. And also just breathe a little bit. So those kinds of activities will make things safer for everybody in those kinds of situations. And Zigar Khantrul Rinpoche says, mindfulness, self-reflection, and analytical meditation are powerful methods to undermine our habitual reactiveness. Shantideva points out that as much as we might want happiness, we cause ourselves and others so much suffering, and all based on the mistaken belief in an intrinsic self. All aggression and all the other afflictive emotions arise from that belief. When we're suffering, we forget that everything arises interdependently from causes and conditions that are countless. And instead, we fixate on one particular cause, and we lose the ability to control our emotions. Zigar Khantrul says, we have not yet built up the strength and momentum of reflecting on the causes and conditions that make things come about. And he points out that on the Bodhisattva path, we have to recognize people in the throes of afflictive emotions are not autonomous beings with total control over their actions. We can't react as if they have like a clear intention to harm us, for it's simply not the case. We also can't expect beings to behave as though they're enlightened when they're not. Given our own confusion and fixation as sentient beings, it should be unsurprising to us when other beings act in childish ways too. So we have a lot of opportunities in this birth to work with our aggression. And that's actually why so many bodhisattvas choose to be reborn here, because it's the perfect setting in which to train one's mind. And that's one of the ways we're so fortunate. And this is such a precious birth. So another way to look at a conflict with someone is from this absolute view, where we can consider the afflictions as being like smoke and Buddha nature as being like the sky itself. And in this case, the smoke, here representing the afflictions, is separate from the sky and can do it no harm. So knowing that others' nature, like our own, their nature is like the sky, their nature is not what's threatening us. It's that fleeting and contingent smoke that threatens us. And that's not who they are in their nature. How does it make sense to get mad at someone when what we're mad at is not who they are? And this brings us to the classic analogy about when someone hits you with a stick. I love this one. And it took me a while to kind of get my head around it. But the idea is if someone hits you with a stick, we don't hold the stick responsible because we know the stick has neither the will or the autonomy to hurt us. We know that the stick must have a person using it, so we get angry at the person. But like the stick, the person holding it is in the grip of anger, which, as we know from our own experience, makes us vulnerable and out of control. It would make much more sense to get angry at the anger that's driving the person holding the stick. And to extend this logic further, aggression arises based on many causes and conditions, but the fundamental cause is our own clinging to the illusion of an intrinsic self. Our own ignorance of the actual state of things is the root of the whole process. That ignorance is the root of samsara, the root of suffering, and it affects everyone. So can we blame someone for what they don't know and what we don't know? Ziegler Control says this is like blaming a blind person for not knowing that your hair is brown. If we contemplate this and apply it in our lives, we'll realize that there's never a sound reason to get angry at anyone. We will continue to react and occasionally lash out, but sticking with this training will gradually chip away at our habitual tendencies to react out of aggression. And taking this approach requires mental agility, or it simply won't stick. And we gain agility through using our mind in new ways. So what's required, this agility, what's required for success with this practice, we gain through trying it. And we have to cultivate at every opportunity that we have to cultivate patience, where our habit would normally be aggression. So it's vital overall that we contemplate whether this kind of unconventional thinking, this uprooting of habitual patterns, is what we really want to do, or if we'd prefer to get angry. So we have to contemplate what will serve us better, aggression or a peaceful heart, and then we have to act accordingly. And that's kind of all I wanted to say, but I do want to point out, when I gave a version of this talk at Columbus KTC, I had a string of people come up to me one by one afterwards and ask a version of the same question, which some of you may have here, which is, isn't anger necessary? Shouldn't we be angry at all this injustice in the world, right? I mean, don't we need that to motivate people? That everybody had a version of that question. I mean, and I think I thought of, like, Lama Kathy said something really wonderful, one of the many wonderful things. She said, anger may be normal, but is it necessary? Like, we need to think about, like, it may be normal for it to arise, but is it actually something that helps? And this is a really tough one. And I think it really gets at the root of probably all spiritual paths, which is that we think anger, like, has to be there as, like, the motivator, the fire. But I think the message that the Buddha gave and all of our teachers and Jesus, I'm guessing, I'm not a Christian, but I mean, I'm assuming with all of these traditions, there's really this idea that, like, compassion can be and is a much more powerful and effective motivator to solve all of these social problems, all of the social injustice in the world. It may be normal to react with anger, but it's not necessary, and it's not really helping the situation, especially when we recognize that it's probably the cause of the injustice we're fighting against anyway. So I think that's kind of where I landed, is I think that the crux of this is, and it may also make me think of a dialogue we had here maybe 6 or 8 months ago about Putin, and the idea that like the same kind of topic, that anger is justified in some situations, or we should think about what makes bad people bad, and us, fighting on the good side. Like, and I think that it always comes back to compassion, right? Like the best way to approach these things is always from a position of compassion, which is a little vulnerable and it is a little open. That's sewa. So thank you. I'm open to any questions or dialogue.
One of the things I've been working on is when, there's a difficult situation, the other person is angry or I'm angry or whatever, is recognizing that the reason that this is happening is because the other person or myself are usually overwhelmed with suffering, and that's what's triggering the anger. And so that helps me to be compassionate.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so true.
I
I'm
liked
glad you
what
brought up.
said.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, finish.
No, I just wanted to say I'm really glad that you're talking about Z.R. Control's book, because one of the other things that I've been thinking about, which is a topic that he wrote on, was the heart of sadness. That's the other thing I've been
Yes,
working on
yeah.
lately. Dzongsar Khyentse Rinpoche has been, he actually quoted Z.R. Control Rinpoche's book, and he was talking about that in one of his Facebook posts too. So that's another, it's interesting that you chose that person to talk about tonight, because I've been thinking about some of his other teachings. Sorry.
Neat. Yeah, he actually referenced that book in the beginning of this, because I think he kind of is taking this as a continuation of that book. Yeah. Joey?
Oh yeah, I was just thinking about how you were saying, yeah, when you get, when you get angry, just go to before you react, like go to the cushion, or and I've just been, I've just been working on that all the time, where I used to be a big reactor for everything. And I don't necessarily go to the cushion really, but I do pause and contemplate, just not getting into a reaction right away. And my mind always goes to, like, if the person that's angry or getting angry with me or impatient or says something that's kind of inappropriate, I just always think, like, all right, I'm not really going to get angry at this. I'm going to think also that that person, like, have compassion for the mind of the person that is thinking this way or reacting so intensely, which happens all the time where I live. It's this everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, it does seem like
But I
it's
don't
doesn't seem like it's getting better in terms of the whole world. So I
know.
understand.
People are mad. People are mad. Like, everywhere you go, there's some altercations going on. And it's like it's good because I look at it and it's a good opportunity to practice and to see it happening, and how do I react to it, and how does it make me, just watching everything go down, like, from it. I almost feel like it's like a movie or something, because it's constant. It's everywhere you go
Yeah.
here, like where I live anyway.
Mm. Well,
Good
I'm glad
topic.
you're there as a force, force for
I'm a silent
compassion.
force. Yeah, for sure.
Sometimes that's the most powerful. Anyone else have any thoughts or questions?
This doesn't directly pertain to patients, but it does pertain to your teachings, Lama Adam. Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's a calendar, Tibetan calendar. I don't know if people have access to, but every day it's almost like a horoscope, but it gives it quotes from a Dharma teaching. Are you familiar with it's at, I
This is
think
the
it's
Surfu calendar?
TibetanCalendar.org or something. But
Oh, I have the Drip calendar, which has a little quote every day too. It's like an app on your phone.
Yeah, it's an app
Cool.
on my phone. And I wanted to read one from a couple days ago to thank Lama Adam, because it says, until you reach the natural state, you need to receive teachings. So listen to the guru's instructions. You won't become Buddhas through mere knowledge of Dharma. Knowledge is not enough. You must practice. Avoid places that disturb your mind, and always stay in places that enhance virtue. But that one line, you won't become Buddhas through mere knowledge of Dharma, is really important. And that's one reason I wanted to thank Tara again for joining us as a somewhat new, not to the Dharma, but to our group, because we try to make our sessions a little bit more homey or congenial. We're such a small group, but I find increasingly every week how much I look forward to just interacting with my Dharma friends. And then we receive such wonderful teachings from the comfort of our home. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Yeah, this one, I know the last couple times I've been having so much fun. This was more of a speech than some of the ones I've been doing here. So if you come back to our, like, there's a lot of times where we do like a dialogue and more workshop type of thing. I actually really like that we can do that here. It's like a perfect size to do the kind of things where we talk a little bit and then we, meditate a little bit, and it's just really great for that. I look forward to it so much too.
I
have a
think
quick
some
question.
time back,
Oh, go ahead.
I think some time back, Lama Kathy had said, patience is accepting people the way they are. And that's helped
I
me
like
many
it.
times when I'm somewhere in front of someone and they're really starting to upset me. And then I'm like, can I just accept them the way they are? And so
Yeah, that's good.
turning it into an acceptance rather than some kind of, what do you call it? Sometimes it's just a little bit of like judo with my own mind to just open me up rather than have me in fight mode.
Absolutely. Judo is a great, I don't know judo, but I know it's like where you kind of switch things. You use the opponent's power against you. Is that what judo is? Because I hear that word used a lot in terms of Dharma.
Yeah, in I don't know if it's in judo.
Judo and Aikido. Aikido is famously taking the opponent's energy and using it to turn the situation around.
It's
Nice.
Redirecting the opponent's energy rather than hitting it head on. You redirect their energy.
Cool.
Yeah.
The opponent here being like self-cherishing, right?
Yeah. Good point. Yeah.
So I have a question. So when you're talking to a friend on the phone and they're in the car and they're like yelling at people, because they're like, what's this guy doing? Da, 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 da. So to help them with their karma, should I say something like, I don't know, what's a good thing to say to them?
Like if somebody is in a car and they're getting raging.
Yeah, they're getting angry. Yeah, and I want to help their karma. I don't want them to get mad. I mean, they're kind of open to Buddhism, but not like, a little bit. But so what's a good way to,
I have somebody close to me that I know your predicament.
Right? I know. I want to save their karma. They don't realize that by them doing that, because I think it's a habit. It's out of habit. He doesn't really, he's not. Yeah.
I think, honestly, like one of the most impactful things anybody said to me, and I'm not sure if this is a Buddhist saying or just a saying in general, but the idea that like anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Okay, that's a good one. Yeah.
So like if you're angry about, particularly in a car, like usually the person that you're angry at has no idea you're angry, and you're not actually changing their behavior in any way at all. And I look at it as one of those like value-added suffering moments where it's like, maybe what they did was not cool and it could have endangered you and other people, but now you're just adding pain on top of what was already an unfortunate situation, and it's opted into, like it's not, oh, hi, kitty. What's kitty's name?
Wall-E, like the Disney character.
Oh yeah. Oh, cute. But that is a tough one. Yeah, it's a hard thing. I think what I tried to do is try to get them to understand that basically that they were hurting themselves in the long run. Like do you see what this is doing to you? And like if you're unhappy about what they did, like you're now making this go on longer, and it may also have to, for me, it came to the point where I also had to say like, and you know what? It's kind of makes me a little uncomfortable too.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
like
that's
I'm
true.
sorry you're suffering, but you should know that it puts an atmosphere in around you that I don't think you want around you, you know.
Yeah, that's good. That sounds good. Thank you.
That's a tough one though.
Yeah, right.
Traffic is like the richest area for Dharma practice if you're ready to engage, you know.
Yeah, that's so true. And yeah, I don't know what it is about traffic that like the most calm people, nice people that you know, the minute they're in the car, it changes. I don't get it.
Yeah.
It's very
I mean, I
weird.
think if I had to conjecture, I would think it has a little bit to do with like the amount of people that all
Mhm.
of a sudden you're interacting with and the separation. It's kind of like the internet in that like you're a little anonymous and there's speed going on, and yeah, it's just such a unique situation. Yeah.
Yeah, very true. Good practice.
I do try to, that's one thing I do when I can remember when I get in the car is I do like before I pull out, start to think like, what nice things can I do for people today on this drive? You know, because
Yeah.
I used to have latent urges to like be the first one, you know, and not let people pass on the right, you know, like these are latent urges from my youth, you know, like when I actually, there was a period where I called myself a road enforcer, like, like you're going to do it right, you know, and I did, it was not a right way to be, you know, but, yeah, so I do catch those urges. And now I try to let people in wherever they are. I try to let people pass. I try to, you know, give waves, you know,
Yeah,
I really try, you know,
that's
but
good.
even that's remedial. I mean, I still have all those latent tendencies I have to work with.
I used to do pretty well at it. I was a limo driver for 2 years in LA, and
Wow.
passengers used to say to me, "How can you stay so calm?" It's like I just don't understand getting upset when 90% of the people that are doing something, they're just not paying attention.
Yeah.
Hmm.
People who are cutting you off
Yeah.
and things, most of the time they're
Yeah.
just not paying attention. They're so deep in samsara, they're worried about getting to work or getting home or something, and just it just doesn't bother me.
Yeah. There's a great saying about that too. That's something like, don't assume ill will where ineptitude is more likely, or something like that. You know, the idea that like in most cases it's just people don't even realize, you know, but we of course think it was something really evil that they set out to do to everybody else on the road, you know. Boy, I bet you got some good stories about that job.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, this saying is a little bit crude, but I like it. Make something idiot proof and they'll make a better idiot.
Yeah.
No, but it's just not paying attention. That's the way I look at it. So that means I don't take
Mhm.
it personally.
Oh, I forgot to say, I just saw Vivian's comment. I didn't get to say goodnight, but that was very nice. Well, any other thoughts? I really had a great time tonight.
I
Thank
wanted to
you.
ask if there's going to be any more Noondro discussions.
Max, we need to schedule one, right?
We haven't done
Yeah,
it
we
lately. Next year,
haven't done January. Yeah, definitely next year we should do more
Okay, so
Nundro
sometime in
discussion.
January, maybe.
Yeah.
possibly it might
Yeah.
be beginning of February as well. Done it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm having lots of deep thoughts about motivation.
I'm with you there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, let's hear one.
Neat.
Hear
I
the
love
thought.
Nindro.
Let's hear one.
Oh, wait, what's the question, Daniel?
She said she's having a lot of deep thoughts about Noondro, and I'm saying, let's hear it. Let's hear about it.
Oh, well, I'm trying to, of course, we all have the lazy aspect, it's like, okay, So I've decided, okay, I'm going to do X number of prostrations per day, X number of, mantra recitations. And I'm kind of like, I'm having a block with the mantra thing. One of the things that my focus when I'm specifically doing the prostrations and the mandala offerings and all that kind of stuff, there's gratitude for my precious human life and feeling grateful that I'm able to do this practice, that I have access to this practice, and that I'm doing it I want to share the merit with other beings that can't do it. But I'm having a problem with the mantras because it's like, I feel like I'm just reciting mumbo jumbo that just is not, it's just not resonating. And so I'm having trouble getting myself to, to really put motivation and the kind of deep intention that I'm able to do with the Guru Yoga and the mandala offering and the prostrations. I'm hitting a block with the mantra recitation, and it's kind of upsetting me.
With
Are you
Vajrasattva,
doing
you
all
mean in
those
particular?
practices at once?
You mean at once?
Yeah.
No. So the way they got it set up with Tergar, so it's like, obviously they don't expect you to accomplish the whole thing in 1 year. So like the first part, you're focusing on doing prostrations and mantra repetitions. And when you get most of that done, then you focus more on mandala offerings and Guru Yoga. So it's kind of it's not all at once. So it's kind of divided up into segments. But so I'm concentrating on the prostration accumulations and the mantra accumulations right now. And so, like I said, it's not difficult. I mean, I acknowledge that it's not difficult, but I just feel like I'm not, having the proper motivation and concentration when I'm doing the mantra repetitions.
When you say mantra repetition, do you mean Vajrasattva?
Yes. Mm-hmm. That's what I mean. Vajrasattva, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That 100-syllable mantra is just like killing me.
Yeah. Is it something have you done it long enough to like it's second nature? Or are you still learning it basically?
No, I'm not. I still haven't managed to memorize it. I've done, obviously, maybe 1,000, but not nearly enough to have it really like ingrained. And I'm still not connecting. So like, I don't speak Tibetan. So what I try to do is recognize certain words, memorize certain words. So I have the gist of what I'm saying, and I'm not quite there yet. I think that's probably why I'm frustrated, because I'm not able to connect with the meaning while I'm saying it. So
yeah.
Well,
I think
isn't the Vajrasattva mantra? I've seen English translation.
Oh yes,
of it.
Eric
And
Tamakusai has done a beautiful English translation
pretty
of it.
much just Vajrasattva, don't forsake me. Vajrasattva, give me your blessing. Vajrasattva, stay with me. So there's no need to. That's the feeling.
Yeah, and just focus on the feeling.
Vajrasattva above your head.
Mm-hmm.
I have two reactions if I could offer it.
Yes, please. Anything.
One is it blows me away. You're doing the Nundro and the Vajrasattva together.
You mean the prostrations?
Pardon me?
You mean the prostrations?
I mean prostrations, yeah. Because Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche specified to us that we had to do, I think it was at least half of the 100,000 prostrations before you could move on to Vajrasattva. You had to at least complete half of the first part. And then,
well, maybe I misunderstood the instructions, but the chart that I received from Tergar,
everybody does it a little different.
Yeah,
but then
I understood that you were supposed to do both, maybe not. I mean, my goal is 300 a day.
I do both of those every day. That's my main practice. So combining them, I don't see a problem. But adding also now, before those are completed, going on to Mandala and Guru yoga.
Well, okay, so what they have you do is you do all 4 parts, but you just do like the minimum recitation of the mandala and the guru yoga, and you do extra accumulations of the prostrations. I mean, I guess
see.
you could
Until you're
so
done
you
with each section.
you go through the whole thing, but you do, you know, instead of, I'll do like 300 prostrations, 300 Vajrasattva mantra repetitions, and then just the, you know, go through the mandala once, the guru yoga once. So you're not spending, you know, massive amounts of time on those 2 things. And then you just change your focus as you, once you finish the prostrations, and then once you finish the Vajrasattva accumulations, then you focus on doing extra mandala offerings and then extra guru yoga, that kind of thing. So the focus just shifts.
Okay.
I think
Lama,
you're, yeah, I would say that just the couple thoughts that I would have is, I mean, there are a whole bunch of different ways to do it. So I know that there's all kinds of ways. With the mantras, I always found it helpful to get that part out of the way first in terms of like memorizing it. So like,
Yeah, I need to focus on that.
yeah, because until that
That will
happens,
help.
it just, there's a mechanical element to it that's like hard to get
Yeah.
over. But I think that learning it aspect of it is also really important, because I know Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche would tell us every time we did a new practice and retreat, like, stay in the mantra slowly. He's like, I know you want to get your repetitions done, but if you say it slowly, then it will naturally get much, much, much faster. And
I've
like,
been saying it slowly, so that's
fast.
that part I'm getting that part.
Good. And then I think the other thing, one thing that always helped me with any deity practice, but especially Vajrasattva, was number one, really reminding myself to cultivate the confidence of the presence of the deity. So like really just recalling Vajrasattva is there, you know, and having that very strong confidence of the presence. And then the other aspect that Rinpoche recommended was doing the practice with the attitude of someone who had just drank poison and was going to see a doctor. So he said, basically, like, you do it with this feeling of like great regret and needing to be helped, you know, like, please help me. Like, it's like very dire situation. And that's like the attitude with which he recommended doing Vajrasattva practice. I mean, we need that purification badly, you know. There's a regret about the negative things we've done, and we know we can have them purified, and Vajrasattva will purify them for us. So we're it's really a powerful you know, prayer in practice.
Yeah, I've
Hope that helps a little bit.
In previous religious experiences, I'm very familiar with the, you know, the confession and the, you know, regret and, you know, resolve not to do it again, blah, 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 all that. So, you know, I've got all that understanding up there. So, but yeah, that's a good point about seeing it as basically an emergency.
Yeah. And then of course that beautiful sort of, it's not guru yoga, but that element of when Vajrasattva dissolves into you is also like this beautiful part of the
Well,
practice,
it's interesting because there's, you know, depending on who you're reading, and these are different karma kaju people, you know, variously they say that the nectar's coming out of his heart, the nectar's coming out of his toe, the nectar, you know, it's like okay. Take your pick. Which one feels more inspiring? I don't know.
Well, and that's a funny thing too, because there are like there's a number of like Charles may know more about this, but there's a number of like common, not mistakes, but just like kind of wrong tankas. And I remember the Karmapa talking about how like the thing about the toe, and he was like, you don't see any tankas where a Vajrasattva's foot is out, kind of like green Tara, so that the nectar can come out of the toe. But like he was saying, like, that's how it is, and we probably need to commission somebody to make that tanka, because that's probably how it should be.
But it's funny because Lama Karma specifically said that the nectar was coming out of the toe, and I'm like, okay. And then I'm reading Jamgon Control's Creation and Completion with the commentary by Chöling
great.
Rinpoche, and he's talking about it coming out of his
Mhm.
heart. And I'm like, okay, these guys are both from the same tradition, and yet it's different. So yeah.
So
yeah, and that's
I'm not sure how to interpret that, but
Mhm.
I mean, it doesn't make any difference to me. But
since we're on this topic, I'd like to ask Lama Adam, when the Amrita or nectar comes up, where we're offering it to the deities at the end of having had it go down and now it comes up. Vajrasattva is still above my head. I have a hard time thinking I'm sending anything into him. So the question is, what is it flowing through him up too? Is he also sending it up at the same time I am, as an offering to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas?
I've never heard an answer. I never heard that. That's a good question. I've never heard that question, so I can't give you an answer that I've heard. I mean, I can only tell you what I think, which is I've always heard it's an offering to Vajrasattva in gratitude for purification. So I always kind of just think of it almost like you would put an offering of water or food in front of a deity. Like I never thought of it going into Vajrasattva. I just kind of thought of it as like going up to him, and then he's satisfied. But that's just my own.
So does it go up in the form of light? Does it go up in the form of, because as we're sending things down, it actually takes different forms according, as Tars pointed out, according to the different teachings.
Can I add something?
Please do.
What I recall was that this golden light comes down from the toe, which is touching your crown, pushing out all the negativity, and then your body fills completely, and then just a little bit of this golden light like pools at the crown of your head, which then Vajrasattva accepts. There's no pushing it, there's no flowing it. It's just like you fill up and then you overflow a little bit, and it comes out of the crown of your head, and then it reaches Vajrasattva.
Okay,
well,
here's something for you. Kabakara Rinpoche said in a teaching we received, that it comes back up out the top of your head and re-enters Dorje Senpa's body via the toe and gradually flows up into him until it reaches the hung in his heart, which becomes an offering that pleases him. I'm glad. Thank you for asking this
there's the answer right there.
Because I
there it
forgotten
is.
that part. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that kind of
written
reminds me of
teachings.
the medicine Buddha practice that Chöling Rinpoche talks about in his book, where you have, offerings flowing out of you and the blessings are flowing back out of the deity, and there's an exchange type thing. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you for looking that up.
Yeah,
you're welcome.
Thank
you.
Okay, Lama Adam,
thank you for asking the question.
Please dedicate.
Yes, thank you all so much. This has been a great conversation and a great time. And
thank you so much.
I wish you all the best of luck, and I hope that you will try out some of this stuff. Maybe try to remember and do a little self-reflection off the cushion and in your practice, and then also in the moment when these irritation and aggression arises. So let's dedicate the merit in the hopes that all beings can attain enlightenment, and at a minimum, maybe recognize their aggression as a chance to cultivate wisdom and compassion. By this merit, may we obtain the omniscience of Buddhahood and defeat our common enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may we free all beings.
Thank you. If anyone wants to stay on after Lama Adam signs
Thank
off.
you,
or if
Lama Adam.